How's it going, YouTube? I'm doing outstanding, and we're back today in ChatGPT. And what I'm actually kind of doing here is something kind of different. Um, this was kind of in a strange thing. I tried to mess around with, kind of being like a D&D campaign-esque thing, except that I am God of everything. So I'll just, I'll read through this. Somebody said that this would make an interesting story, so here we are. Let's start a new game. Whatever world you want it to be, the only thing is that my character will essentially be a god. Like Zeno from Dragon Ball, mixed with Superman or something. Incredibly powerful, easily the most powerful thing in the world. Essentially, if I decide something, it is so. Like, if a guy is trying to fight me, I can simply decide that he doesn't exist anymore. Questions? I pose it to ChatGPT, making sure it understands the concept of what I'm going for here. So it welcomes me to the engine, gives me some basics. Wants me to describe my character here. The name will be Halifax. No reasoning, it just sounded kind of cool. Appearance depends largely on what I want my appearance to look like in the moment. Mostly a human male, when in mortal form. Blonde hair, blue eyes, lots of muscle. God form could be something beyond comprehension. Any mere mortal looking at it will be driven to madness. Of control over creation, destruction, time, and I can do as I please, so long as I can imagine it. Personality will be a little bit of a trickster. Halifax is well aware that many people do not know him nor his power. He isn't malevolent, but also does not consider destroying mortal lives to be evil, any more than a human would consider an ant. He just simply exists on a different level, and he enjoys playing with the mortals. So it kind of, it gives some description here of, Shardvale, Cosmos, True Sovereign, things that honestly never come up. You stand on the edge of one such realm, Aoria, a land of rolling plains, towering spires of glass and mortals waging a ceaseless war between magic and technology. Halifax's divine senses have detected a faint ripple in the threads of time. Something or someone has been tampering with them, an act you did not authorize. A mortal tinkering with time? Impossible. Or perhaps intriguing enough to let it play out. For now. How would Halifax begin his journey in this land? Perhaps take immortal guise and walk among the people to see who or what dare touch the threads of creation? Summon the meddler directly to answer for their actions? Reshape the entire realm on a whim just to see what happens? Your power is absolute. What will you do first? Walk casually into the battlefield disguised as a soldier of some kind. Casually, dancing around any weapons or anything, though they wouldn't affect me anyway. Once I reach the center of the battlefield, I pause time, except for the person meddling with it. I then summon a table and pretend to play solitaire while waiting for him to discover me. I'm gonna test something real quick. Maybe you guys can just hear them read it out. Well, it's not picking it up. Let me turn that on real quick. Back speakers.
The battlefield of Aoria. The air is thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Clashing armies scream battle cries as the sounds of steel meeting steel ring out. A colossal war machine, half a tank, half a beast, lumbers across the battlefield, spitting fire as soldiers scramble for cover. Halifax, in his mortal guise, walks unbothered into the fray. Dressed in the plain armor of a soldier, his golden hair gleams under the harsh sunlight. Incongruous amidst the grime and chaos, he strolls, almost lazily, sidestepping arrows, cannon fire, and explosions. The projectiles would disintegrate before reaching him, though Halifax makes a show of dodging for flair. A warhammer swings for his head. He bends backward with a pirouette, the strike missing by a whisper. None take note of his oddity, too consumed by the frenzy around them. Reaching the center, the ground at the heart of the battlefield is scorched, a no man's land where only the dead reside. Halifax halts here, arms crossed, observing the carnage with an amused smirk. Then, with a thought, time bends to his whim. The battlefield stills as if caught in amber. Arrows hang in midair, soldiers frozen mid-strike, flames ceasing their dance. The world falls silent, save for one exception. Somewhere close by, a single mortal stumbles forward, disoriented, clutching a gleaming trinket pulsing faintly with a blue glow. Hash summoning the scene. Halifax extends a hand. A simple wooden table materializes in front of him, accompanied by a deck of cards that shuffles itself. He begins dealing out solitaire, humming a nonsensical tune. The mortal, a young man in ragged mage's robes, freezes when he notices the incongruity of the god's presence. His hands tremble as the trinket slips from his grasp. "Ah, there you are," Halifax says without looking up, casually flipping a card. "You've been a busy little thing, haven't you? Twisting the threads of time, my threads, mind you, without asking. Naughty, naughty." The mortal hesitates, sweat beading on his brow. His voice cracks as he speaks. "What? Who are you? What is this?" Halifax glances up from his cards, a sly smile tugging at his lips. "This?" He gestures to the still battlefield in the card game. "This is my way of asking. Do you like to play games? Or shall we skip the pleasantries? What do you do with the meddler?" Gently inquire what he was trying to achieve, offering him a chance to explain himself. 2. Pluck his knowledge from his mind without asking, ensuring you know the truth immediately. Tease him further, asking him to join you in a game of cards. If he wins, he keeps his life. 4. Snap your fingers and erase him, deeming his interference beneath your concern. Or, of course, you can take a custom action.
Reshuffle the cards and have the deck be the dealer, starting a game of poker and summoning the man into the chair opposite of me. Tell me, what are you up to while we play? Don't worry, I won't cheat. Probably. Meanwhile, I have already racked his entire brain and know everything he knows. I'm just curious to see what he tries to say instead. Wish I didn't have to scroll down to the bottom here.
The cosmic game begins with a flourish of your hand. The solitaire cards scatter, vanishing into the air before reforming into a perfect deck. The deck hovers in midair, shuffling itself with supernatural precision, its movements hypnotic. Another chair materializes across from Halifax, and before the meddler can protest, he is yanked into it by an unseen force. The man stares at the floating deck, then at Halifax, his mouth hanging open. "Poker," Halifax declares cheerfully, leaning back in his chair. "The deck will deal for us. Best of 5 rounds. Don't worry, I won't cheat. Probably." He winks mischievously. Meanwhile, your omnipotent mind has already delved into the mortal's thoughts. His name is Ulrich Dane, a former apprentice mage turned rogue scholar. The trinket in his possession is an ancient temporal shard, an artifact capable of minor temporal manipulation, scavenged from a forgotten ruin. Ulrich's goal was ambitious: to stop the war entirely by erasing its origin, though he vastly underestimated the forces at play. The deck deals the cards perfect hands landing before each of you. Ulrich clutches his cards tightly, his hands shaking. His face twists into a mask of panic, but he forces himself to speak. I was trying to stop this madness. The war, I mean. I thought if I could just turn back the clock, undo the first spark of conflict, then maybe this wouldn't happen. He glances at you nervously, clearly aware that his words will likely not suffice. You, of course, know the truth. Ulrich wasn't just trying to stop the war. He wanted to rewrite time so that he could claim credit as a savior and rise to power, a desire buried deep beneath his nobler aspirations. Still, you let him talk, watching him squirm. Playing the hand. Your cards are impeccable, of course. With your powers, you could reshape them to win on a whim. But for now, you simply watch as the first round unfolds. The floating deck, impartial and mechanical, flips over the first few cards for the table. Interesting, Halifax muses, stroking his chin as he studies his hand. Then casually, the temporal shard is a tricky little thing. Not really designed for mortals, is it? And tampering with time? Well, let's just say you're lucky you didn't unravel the entire thread. I'd hate to have to sew reality back together. Ulrich's face pales. I didn't mean to. "Oh, I know you didn't," Halifax interrupts, a sly grin on his face. "You were just playing God, weren't you?" What do you do next? Allow him to continue his explanation, but guide the conversation toward understanding his motives more fully. Call out his selfish ambitions openly, mocking his attempts to hide them. Use the poker game as a metaphor, giving cryptic commentary that will only make sense later. End the charade, declare his fate, and decide how to deal with the meddler. Or, as always, take a custom action.
Suddenly, adjust the person across from me to fit my immortal image. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and gratuitous muscles, altering his mind so that he does not know any different. Atomize the crystals so that he cannot alter time any further. Nothing showboaty, no movements on my part at all. Just keeping his focus on the game of poker. Whether by distraction or simply by letting his focus, or setting his focus. Who doesn't want to play God sometimes? I get it. Trust me, I do. I'll let you be the savior here. In fact, take this dagger. You must simply look into someone's eyes, and they will bow to your whim immediately with this. You can be whatever you want when the people are behind you.
A quiet shift in reality. Without so much as a flicker of effort, Halifax rewrites the man across from him. Ulrich's scraggly frame fills out with thick, sculpted muscles. His hair becomes a golden cascade, and his sunken eyes turn a vivid, piercing blue. His ragged robes morph into sleek, polished armor that radiates authority. Halifax ensures the transformation is flawless. Ulrich has no memory of ever looking or being any other way. To him, this is his truth. As for the temporal shard, it vanishes in a microscopic burst of particles, utterly erased from existence. Ulrich remains oblivious, his gaze fixed on the poker game, as if he were incapable of thinking of anything else. Halifax's subtle power ensures his focus doesn't waver. The divine gift. Halifax leans forward, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes, and produces a dagger seemingly out of nowhere. It is ornate, with a hilt carved from obsidian and a blade that seems to shimmer with an inner fire. He places it gently on the table between them, the weapon's mere presence commanding attention. Who doesn't want to play God sometimes? Halifax says, his voice calm but laced with knowing amusement. He studies his cards as if this entire situation were nothing but a pleasant pastime. I get it. Trust me, I do. He glances up, meeting Ulrich's wide-eyed stare. I'll let you be the savior here. Go ahead, take it. He nudges the dagger slightly closer. This blade, all you have to do is look into someone's eyes, and they'll bow to your whim. No resistance, no second guessing. You could have whatever you want. The man hesitates, his trembling hand hovering over the dagger. You're giving this to me? He asks, disbelief thick in his voice. Of course, Halifax replies, his tone light, almost bored. You wanted to save the world, didn't you? Well, I'm giving you a tool to do it. Isn't that what you mortals always want? Power, but in a way that lets you tell yourselves you're still the hero? Ulrich's decision. The room seems to shrink as the weight of the moment settles over Ulrich. His fingers brush the dagger, and he looks up at Halifax with a mix of awe and trepidation. What's the catch? He finally asks, his voice quiet. Halifax smiles faintly, his gaze never leaving Ulrich's. Oh, no catch at all. Just know this, the world will remember you as its savior, or its tyrant. That part's entirely up to you. Ulrich swallows hard, nodding slowly. He picks up the dagger, its gleaming blade catching from the frozen sunlight. His expression shifts, a flicker of confidence blooming behind his eyes.
I phase out of existence, leaving the table and the card game. I resume time and watch to see what this mortal does.
Tash, the resumption of time. Halifax vanishes without a sound, the table and card game dissolving into the ether as if they were never there. Time resumes its flow, and the cacophony of the battlefield roars back to life. Soldiers clash, arrows fly, and the war machine lumbers forward, oblivious to the divine intervention that just transpired. Ulrich, now standing in the middle of the chaos, grips the dagger tightly in his hand. His new form commands attention. His golden armor gleams like the sun, and his presence radiates authority. For a moment, he seems disoriented, glancing at the dagger as if unsure how it came to be in his possession. Then, his resolve hardens. Ulrich's first move. Ulrich strides forward with newfound confidence, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield. The dagger feels alive in his hand, pulsing faintly with latent power. He raises it and locks eyes with a soldier, a grizzled veteran charging toward him with a battle axe. The moment their gazes meet, the man's expression changes, softening into awe. He drops his weapon and falls to his knees, bowing before Ulrich. Gasps ripple through the nearby soldiers as they witness the scene. Word spreads quickly, a shining figure with a blade that commands obedience.
Sorry to pause you, but I specifically said that I left the table and card game. I thought the imagery of him playing at the table in the middle of the battlefield would be funny as time resumed. I can't have it read this one, because it violates their policies. That's okay. I see what you're going for. Let me rewind and adjust. Here's how it unfolds with the table and card game intact when time resumes. The resumption of time. Time resumes its chaotic flow, and the battlefield explodes back to life. Soldiers clash, arrows scream through the air, and explosions rumble across the scorched land. In the dead center of the chaos sits Ulrich, transformed into a radiant golden figure, calmly playing poker at a wooden table. The sight is absurd. Soldiers skid to a halt, blinking in disbelief. Arrows freeze mid-flight as archers gape, too dumbfounded to release their next volleys. Even the war machine halts at its advance, the beast-like contraption letting out a confused, mechanical growl. Ulrich, oblivious to the stares, flips a card, studying his hand with intense concentration. The dagger rests on the table beside him, its sinister gleam drawing mortal eyes like moths to a flame. Ripples through the battlefield. A nearby captain recovers first. He storms toward the table, sword drawn, barking orders to his troops. "Kill that fool! He's mocking us!" But the captain gets no closer than a few steps before Ulrich, almost casually, glances up and locks eyes with him. The dagger's power surges and the captain drops his sword instantly, falling to his knees. "My lord!" the man gasps, his voice trembling with devotion. The scene cascades like a wave. Soldiers on both sides lower their weapons, staring at Ulrich with a mix of awe and fear. Many kneel, their heads bowed, as murmurs ripple through the crowd. "Is it a god? A chosen one? Oh, a savior!" Ulrich seems to realize what's happening, his lips curling into a faint, almost smug smile. He sets his cards down, rising from his chair to address the crowd. The speech. He lifts the daggers high, its blade catching the light, and his voice rings out across the battlefield. "Lay down your arms. This senseless war ends now. I am here to unite you, not as a conqueror, but as your guide to peace." Cheers erupt from both sides, their former hostilities melting away in the presence of what they believe to be divine intervention. The war machine falls silent as its pilots disembark, kneeling before Ulrich. Watching from afar. From your higher plane of existence, you observe the scene unfold like a painter admiring his work. Ulrich's confidence grows, his gestures more grandiose, as he bathes in the adoration of mortals. Yet you can sense the subtle currents of arrogance beginning to creep into his heart. The battlefield, once a place of bloodshed, now buzzes with a fervent energy. Mortals chant Ulrich's name, and for now he appears every bit the savior you allowed him to become. Give me several years of updates on Ulrich. As time means nothing to me, I'll simply watch him, his whole life, choosing to interfere whenever I please. I think this one it should be able to read.
Watching Ulrich through the years. Time flows swiftly as you, Halifax, remain an unseen observer. The years unfold before you like a tapestry, each thread revealing Ulrich's rise, triumphs, and eventual unraveling. You do not interfere, not yet. You watch with a mixture of curiosity and amusement as the mortal you shaped begins to play the role you handed him. Year 1, the savior of Ioria. Ulrich's rise to power is meteoric. The battlefield's surrender transforms him into a living legend. Stories spread like wildfire, a golden warrior who brought peace with a single blade. The kingdoms of Ioria lay down their arms, uniting under his leadership. Ulrich declares himself not a king, but a guide of the people, a self-styled shepherd of peace. The dagger you gave him is both his symbol of power and his greatest weapon. He uses it sparingly, carefully choosing moments to compel obedience, ensuring his reputation as a benevolent savior remains untarnished. You notice, however, that he enjoys the worship. His mortal ego swells, even as he tells himself he acts only for the greater good. Year 5, the Golden Era. Under Ulrich's rule, Eoria flourishes. War is a thing of the past. Cities thrive, trade routes expand, and innovations blossom. Ulrich commissions massive statues of himself, justified, of course, as symbols of unity. He wields the dagger sparingly, using it to pacify dissenters and enforce his decrees with precision. Still, cracks begin to show. The peace is not entirely natural. You see whispers of rebellion brewing in shadowed corners. Some mortals begin to question the source of Ulrich's power and the morality of his divine rule. Ulrich, for his part, dismisses them as malcontents, though he grows increasingly paranoid. You wonder how long he can keep his benevolent mask in place. Year 10, the Tyrant's Edge. Ulrich's paranoia reaches a tipping point. The whispers of rebellion grow louder, and a rogue faction, calling themselves the Shard Seers, emerges. They claim Ulrich is not divine, but a fraud who manipulates minds with an unholy artifact. Though their numbers are small, their words resonate with disillusioned mortals. Ulrich responds harshly. The dagger, once used sparingly, becomes a tool of fear. He begins rooting out traitors and forcing his will upon them. Publicly, he decries the Shardseers as heretics, using the full force of his armies to crush them. His visage as a savior begins to tarnish. Statues are torn down in some corners of Eoria. Yet his loyalists remain fervent, believing Ulrich's actions are necessary to preserve peace. Year 20, the Fall of the Savior. By the 2-decade mark, Ulrich's kingdom is in decline. His increasingly iron-fisted rule has created as much unrest as the wars he sought to end. The Shardseers, now a full-blown rebellion, march on his capital. Ulrich meets them personally, dagger in hand, determined to crush this final resistance. The battle is bloody, and Ulrich emerges victorious, but at a cost. The rebellion leaves his cities in ruin, his people impoverished, and his rule shaky. More importantly, he is now isolated. His closest advisors, once enchanted by his charisma, abandon him. Even the dagger seems to weigh heavier in his hand, as if it resents the way it has been wielded. Year 30, the Forgotten King. Ulrich's legend fades. Once a golden beacon of hope, he becomes a shadow of his former self. His kingdom, now fractured, regards him as a cautionary tale. A man consumed by the very power he sought to wield for good. The statues of him crumble, and his name is spoken in hushed tones, more curse than blessing. Ulrich himself retreats to a crumbling palace, surrounded by echoes of his glory days. He clings to the dagger, its once brilliant glow dimmed, and spends his days in solitude. You watch him sit on his throne, staring into the distance, muttering to himself. The years pass like seconds to you. You see Ulrich's journey for what it truly is, the natural arc of a mortal unfit to wield divine power. He burned brightly, only to be consumed by his own hubris. You know you could interfere at any moment, revive him, crush him, reshape his destiny entirely. Yet there's a strange satisfaction in letting him linger in his self-made purgatory. The question now is whether you will continue to observe or finally step back into his life.
I go to him in his final moments, setting him up at a poker table like before. That was interesting. How are you?
Ulrich's final moments. The crumbling palace is silent, its grand halls now shrouded in dust and shadow. Ulrich sits slumped on his throne, the dagger resting loosely in his trembling hand. His once golden armor is tarnished, his muscles wasted from years of solitude. His breath comes shallow, his eyes clouded with age and regret. As his life begins to slip away, a faint light fills the room, soft and warm. Suddenly, the space around him transforms. The throne dissolves, replaced by a simple wooden chair. A table appears before him just as it had all those years ago, with a neatly shuffled deck of cards hovering in the air. Across from him, you materialize in your mortal guise, the same as he remembers, blonde hair, blue eyes, and that faintly amused smile. Ulrich blinks, confused, his hand instinctively tightening on the dagger. Then recognition dawns. and his lips part in disbelief. You, he whispers, his voice hoarse. It's you. You lean back in your chair, casually gesturing to the cards. Well, that was interesting, you say with a wry smile. How are
How are
you?
you?
Ulrich's response. He stares at you for a long moment, his expression a mixture of awe, anger, and despair. Slowly, he places the dagger on the table, its once vivid glow now barely a flicker. How am I? He says, his voice trembling. I'm tired. I tried so hard. I thought I was saving them, but his voice breaks, and he lowers his gaze. I don't even know who I am anymore. He looks up at you, his blue eyes filled with desperation. Why? Why did you give me this? Why did you let me become this?
I dismiss this question without even regarding it. Do you want to go around again? I'll send you back with all the knowledge to that moment on the battlefield.
Half the offer. Ulrich's question lingers in the air, unanswered, as you casually wave it away with the indifference of a being far beyond mortal concerns. His face twists into confusion and frustration, but before he can press the matter, you lean forward, steepling your fingers on the table. Do you want to go around again? You ask, your tone light, almost playful. I'll send you back, with everything you know now, to that moment on the battlefield. You can rewrite the story, make different choices, be the hero you always wanted to be. Your smile quirks slightly, a flicker of amusement in your eyes. Or not. Entirely up to you. The room seems to hold its breath as Ulrich stares at you, his trembling hands gripping the edge of the table. He looks down at the dagger, then back at you, his expression shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Disbelief, longing, fear, and finally, curiosity. Ulrich's response. You'd let me do it again? He whispers, his voice barely audible. Why? What's the point? I failed. I failed them all. You shrug, leaning back in your chair. Who cares about failure? You gotta play the game. And now I'm giving you a chance to play it again. Maybe you'll win this time. Maybe you won't. The only thing that matters is whether you want to try. His gaze falls to the table, his expression deeply conflicted. For several long moments, he says nothing, the silence broken only by the faint shuffle of the cards hovering nearby. Finally, he looks up at you, his face resolute. I want to try again, he says, his voice steadier now. But I want to do it differently.
He is back on the battlefield playing poker with himself as time resumes, all his knowledge intact.
The battlefield revisited. The moment Ulrich agrees, the world around him dissolves. The crumbling palace, the poker table, and even his own worn body fade into a swirl of golden light. Time rewinds, collapsing in on itself as Halifax's will reshapes reality. The scene resumes. The battlefield roars back to life as if nothing had happened. Soldiers scream, blades clash, and arrows cut through the smoky air. In the dead center of the chaos sits Ulrich, playing poker. Not with Halifax this time, but with himself. Across the table, his opponent is a perfect mirror image, shuffling the cards and dealing them out with the same precision he remembers. Ulrich blinks in shock, his newly restored body humming with energy. He glances at his hands, youthful and strong again. His polished armor gleams, the dagger lying in its familiar place on the table. All the knowledge of his past life remains, clear as day. He knows exactly where this path leads if he treads it the same way. His mirrored self smirks, identical down to the faintly cocky tilt of his head. Well, the reflection says, flipping a card onto the table, you wanted another chance. Better make it count.
I watch his life again, until the end, just to see how things play out.
Tash, the second life of Ulrich. As time flows forward once more, you remain a silent observer, watching Ulrich shape his destiny with the benefit of his past life's memories. His knowledge of his failures serves as a guide, but it also weighs heavily on him. The choices he makes now diverge in fascinating ways, and his second life becomes a new story entirely. Year 1. A new savior. This time, Ulrich plays the moment on the battlefield differently. He uses his newfound confidence and charisma to rally the soldiers around him without resorting to the dagger's power. The opposing sides, drawn to his strange calmness amidst the chaos, begin to lay down their arms. Ulrich positions himself as a mediator, not a conqueror. Rather than proclaiming himself a savior, He shares credit with the leaders of both sides, insisting on building a coalition. The dagger remains hidden, its power untouched. The legend of Ulrich begins again, Den, but this time as a humble unifier rather than a godlike figure. Year 5. A shared peace. Ulrich's coalition flourishes. The war ends, and a fragile peace takes hold. He avoids building monuments to himself, focusing instead on uniting the kingdoms through diplomacy and shared prosperity. He becomes known as the Golden Mediator, a mortal leader who rises above ego to serve the greater good. Though he refrains from using the dagger, its presence haunts him. And he keeps it locked away, fearing its influence. You can see the strain it causes him, the temptation to use its power to fix problems faster. But he resists, determined to succeed on his own terms. Year 10. The price of humility. Despite his efforts, cracks begin to form. The coalition he built starts to show its weaknesses. Without the unifying force of a singular ruler, rivalries resurface. Old grudges flare into new conflicts, and political intrigue threatens to undo his work. Ulrich is torn. He remembers how easily he held control in his first life, how the dagger silenced dissent with a glance. This time, he refuses to wield it, relying instead on mortal means. But the cost is high. Betrayal by those he trusted, the loss of key allies, and the erosion of the peace he worked so hard to build. Year 20. The Reluctant King. At the height of the chaos, Ulrich finally breaks. Desperate to save what remains of the coalition, he draws the dagger from its hiding place and uses it sparingly, forcing peace upon warring factions. The move works, for a time, but the act takes its toll on him. The man who once vowed never to play God now wields the dagger like a necessary evil. This time, the people do not see him as a savior. They see a man who betrayed his own ideals for the sake of order. Ulrich rules as a reluctant king, isolated from the very people he sought to protect. Year 30. The quiet end. By the time his second life draws to a close, Ulrich is a shadow of his former self. His coalition still stands, but it is held together by fear rather than trust. He spends his final years in quiet reflection, haunted by the realization that even with all his knowledge and good intentions, he could not escape the burden of power. On his deathbed, he looks at the dagger one last time. "It was always too much," he whispers to himself. "No one should wield it, not even me." Halifax perspective. You watch as Ulrich's story ends once more, his second life marked by different choices, but ultimately arriving at a similar conclusion. This time, however, his legacy is one of bittersweet compromise, rather than outright failure. He achieved peace, but at the cost of his ideals and the respect of his people. Right? You sense no regret in him as he takes his final breath, only exhaustion and the faintest glimmer of pride that he tried.
Allowing him to die, we warp back to the battlefield, playing poker with time frozen. How'd you think you did the second time?
Back to the battlefield. As Ulrich breathes his last, the world around him dissolves once more, his mortal life flickering out like the faintest ember. Time bends and twists under your will, and in an instant, you are back on the battlefield, the place where it all began. The chaos is frozen once again. Soldiers hang mid-swing, arrows hover in the air, and the war machine is locked in a half-step. Sitting at the center of it all is Ulrich, once again young and strong, his golden armor gleaming under the frozen sun. Across from him, the poker table waits, the cards shuffling themselves as if alive. Ulrich blinks, confused, his hand instinctively moving toward the dagger, which still rests at his side. But then he looks up and sees you, seated across from him with that familiar, amused smile, casually flipping a card onto the table. "How do you think you did the second time?" you ask, leaning back in your chair as if you hadn't been absent for decades. Ulrich's response. Ulrich stares at you, his expression shifting rapidly, shock, anger, and finally resignation. He exhales deeply, setting the dagger on the table and shaking his head. "I thought I'd do better," he admits, his voice heavy with weariness. "I remembered everything. Every failure, every regret, and I still fell short. I wanted to fix it, to be better, but I guess I'm just not cut out for this." He glances at the frozen battlefield, his eyes lingering on the soldiers locked in their mortal struggle. "No matter what I did, it felt like there was always something slipping through my fingers. Maybe power like this? Maybe it just isn't meant for someone like me."
Let's go for a walk. We walk through the battlefield, still frozen. I point at random people, flooding his mind with their thoughts and memories. Not allowing it to completely overwhelm his mortal mind, but allowing him to get a better idea of the people he was trying to lead.
A walk through frozen time. The poker table vanishes with a flick of your will, replaced by the frozen chaos of the battlefield. You rise smoothly, gesturing for Ulrich to follow. He hesitates for a moment, still gripping the dagger, but ultimately stands and trails behind you, his movements cautious. Let's go for a walk, you say, your tone as casual as if inviting a friend for a stroll through a garden. As you move through the stillness, the frozen figures of soldiers surround you. Some are mid-swing, their faces twisted with rage or fear. Others lie motionless on the ground, their lifeless expressions locked in time. Ulrich's eyes dart nervously from figure to figure, his steps faltering as the weight of the moment settles over him. Without warning, you pause and gesture toward a young soldier, barely more than a boy, frozen in the act of raising his shield. Ulrich steps closer, his expression curious but wary. Here, you say simply, and with a thought, you flood Ulrich's mind with the soldier's memories. The first mind. Ulrich gasps, his knees nearly buckling under the weight of what he sees. The boy's life unfolds in rapid flashes, growing up in a poor village, struggling to care for his siblings, conscription into the army, and the quiet, gnawing fear of dying far from home. When the vision ends, Ulrich stumbles back, his face pale. He didn't even want to be here, he mutters. He just wanted to survive. You offer no response, continuing your walk. The second mind. Next, you gesture to a grizzled warrior, his face lined with scars, his sword raised high. Ulrich braces himself, but the rush of thoughts comes all the same. The man's rage at the death of his son, his thirst for vengeance, and his willingness to burn the world if it meant feeling whole again. The pain is raw, almost palpable, and Ulrich winces as if struck. Is this what they were all fighting for, he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Some, you reply, moving on. The third mind. This time you point to a mage, her face calm but her hands trembling. Ulrich stiffens as her memories flood his mind. Her desperate attempt to protect her family, her fear of losing control of the destructive magic she barely understands, and her quiet prayer to gods she no longer believes in. As the vision fades, Ulrich turns to you, his expression conflicted. They're all so broken, he says. Every one of them. And I thought I could fix it all. The weight of leadership. You stop walking and turn to face him, the frozen battlefield stretching endlessly around you. Now you understand, you say, your voice low but firm. These are the people you were trying to lead. Each one with their own pain, their own dreams, their own reasons for fighting. Did you think you could simply wave a dagger and make it all go away? Ulrich lowers his gaze, gripping the dagger tightly. I thought I could. Help them. I thought I could make it better. And, you ask, tilting your head, do you think you succeeded?
With a wave, all their memories flood into him. From his perspective, he lives each one of their lives, every soldier on the battlefield. I take great care not to overwhelm him, enhancing his brain to handle the information. Once done, we're sat back at the same old poker table. What do you say? Want to go around again?
Shashat, living every life with a simple wave of your hand, the memories of every soldier on the battlefield. Thousands of lives, each filled with its own joys, sorrows, struggles, and fears, rush into Ulrich's mind. From his perspective, he lives each one of their lives. He feels the crushing despair of a father who loses his child, the fierce pride of a warrior defending their home, the quiet resignation of a soldier forced into battle against their will. He experiences their loves, losses, hopes, and fears in excruciating detail, as if they were his own. You carefully enhance his mind to handle the deluge, preventing him from being overwhelmed. The process takes mere moments to you, but to Ulrich, it feels like a lifetime. By the time it ends, he has lived countless lives, each leaving an indelible mark on his soul. Back at the poker table, the world snaps back to the frozen battlefield, and the two of you are seated once again at the familiar poker table. The cards shuffle themselves, the dagger gleams faintly on the table between you, and Ulrich sits slumped in his chair, his hands trembling as he tries to process what just happened. You lean back, your expression calm, but with that ever-present glimmer of amusement in your eyes. Well, you say, gesturing casually to the cards. What do you say? You want to go around again? Ulrich's response. Ulrich takes a long moment to respond. His face is pale, his eyes haunted, yet deeply thoughtful. He looks down at the dagger, then at the cards, and finally up at you. There is no anger in his gaze this time, only a quiet, weary understanding. I don't know if I can, he says, his voice raw. I thought I understood them before. Not really. Not until now. He takes a shaky breath, his hands clenching into fists. How do you make choices for people when every single one of them has their own story? Their own pain? He falls silent, staring at the dagger as if it holds all the answers.
You now know all these people in ways no mortal ever could. You know everything about them, about their pains and loves. You alone just might be able to do this.
A god's encouragement. You lean forward slightly, your piercing gaze locking onto Ulrich's weary eyes. The cards hover mid-shuffle as if the universe itself holds its breath, awaiting your words. You now know all these people in ways no mortal ever could, you say, your voice calm but carrying the weight of undeniable truth. You've lived their lives, felt their pains, and shared in their loves. You understand them in ways even they don't understand themselves. Ulrich's hands tremble as he grips the edge of the table, his gaze darting to the frozen battlefield around you, then back to the dagger. You let the silence stretch, giving him a moment to absorb the enormity of what you're saying. You alone, you continue, your tone softening, just might be able to do this. Not as a god, not as a savior, but as someone who truly knows what it means to be them. Ulrich's reaction. Ulrich takes a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and determination. I don't know if I can, he admits, his voice barely above a whisper, but maybe I have to try. He looks at the dagger, his fingers brushing its hilt. If I go back, if I try again, it has to be different. I can't rule them. I can't force them. I have to guide them to something better. Help them help themselves.
Without so much as a flash, time resumes and he is again alone at the poker table.
Time resumes. Alone at the table without fanfare or spectacle, time resumes its relentless march. The battlefield explodes back into chaos, the clash of steel, the screams of soldiers, and the thunderous roar of war machines filling the air once more. Yet in the dead center of it all, there is only Ulrich. The poker table remains, a surreal island of stillness amidst the carnage. Cards shuffle themselves in a mechanical rhythm, indifferent to the chaos around them. The dagger sits where he left it, gleaming faintly in the smoky light. Ulrich glances around, his brow furrowing as he realizes you are gone. His gaze drifts back to the dagger, his reflection shimmering faintly on its blade. The weight of everything, his memories, the lives he's lived, and the immense knowledge now coursing through him, settles onto his shoulders like an invisible shroud. He's alone now. The next move is his, and his alone. Halifax's perspective. From your eternal vantage, you watch him quietly. No mortal knows you're there, but you see everything. Ulrich hesitates, his hand hovering over the cards, his expression a storm of doubt and determination. The battlefield rages around him, oblivious to the monumental moment playing out at its heart. For Ulrich, this is no longer just a fight. It's a choice, a chance to prove, not to you, but to himself, that he can be something greater than before. You remain silent. The stage is his. Fate of the moment. The poker table remains absurdly out of place amid the battlefield's chaos. Ulrich, seated at its center, stares at the dagger resting on the table, his reflection flickering in its blade. Around him, soldiers clash, the din of war swelling as neither side notices the man at the heart of their carnage. For a long moment, Ulrich does nothing. His hands rest on the table, trembling slightly, as he contemplates everything you've shown him and every life he now...
Oh, yeah, she kind of messed up a little bit in that beginning paragraph, didn't she? Oh, that was odd. Let's try again.
Hashtar, the weight of the moment. The poker table remains absurdly out of place amid the battlefield's chaos. Ulrich, seated at its center, stares at the dagger resting on the table, his reflection flickering in its gleaming blade. Around him, soldiers clash, the din of war swelling as neither side notices the man at the heart of their carnage. For a long moment, Ulrich does nothing. His hands rest on the table, trembling slightly as he contemplates everything you've shown him and every life he now carries in his mind. He looks up at the battlefield, scanning the faces of the soldiers frozen in their singular moments of violence, and he exhales slowly. A choice is made. Ulrich reaches out, not for the dagger, but for the deck of cards. He begins to deal them, one card for himself, one for an imagined opponent. The act is slow and deliberate, a strange calm settling over him as the cards fall into place. As the cards form a hand in front of him, he studies them, then speaks aloud, his voice steady but laced with an edge of resolve. "You always think you have more time to figure it out," he says, addressing no one in particular. But maybe it's not about figuring it out. Maybe it's just about trying. He flicks his eyes toward the dagger, his fingers tightening into a fist. No shortcuts, not this time. He stands, the chair scraping against the ground, and picks up the dagger, not as a weapon, but as a burden. He holds it carefully, almost reverently, before slipping it into a sheath at his side. His gaze sweeps across the battlefield, his shoulders squaring as he takes in the full scope of the chaos. A new path. Ulrich steps away from the poker table, striding toward the nearest group of soldiers locked in combat. His voice cuts through the cacophony, a commanding yet strangely humble tone that arrests their attention. "Enough!" he bellows, his voice carrying a weight that is neither divine nor mortal, but something in between. "Put down your weapons. This isn't the way." The soldiers hesitate, their gazes flicking between each other and the radiant figure before them. Ulrich takes another step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of the dagger, but making no move to draw it. He meets their eyes, one by one, and speaks again. "Fight for something better than this. Together, or none of us will survive." Ripples of change. The battlefield begins to shift. Soldiers falter, their weapons lowering as murmurs ripple through the ranks. Ulrich's words strike a chord, not because of the dagger's power, but because they carry the weight of someone who truly understands them, someone who has lived their pain, their fears, their hopes. The leaders of both armies, drawn by the commotion, approach cautiously. Ulrich stands his ground, addressing them directly. He doesn't command, he appeals. He speaks not as a god or a king, but as a man who has seen the cost of this war in ways they never could. Slowly, grudgingly, weapons begin to fall. The tide of battle turns. Not through violence, but through words and a shared understanding. Halifax perspective, from your vantage point, you observe the shift with quiet satisfaction. Ulrich doesn't use the dagger's power, not even once. Instead, he wields the wisdom gained from the lives he's lived, guiding the soldiers and leaders towards something greater. The poker table, forgotten, vanishes as you will it away. Its purpose is fulfilled. For now, you watch. Whether Ulrich's efforts lead to lasting peace or another cycle of conflict, you know this moment is different. He has changed, and perhaps, just this once, the world might change with him. Watching Ulrich's second path to the end. As Ulrich steps onto this new path, you retreat to your timeless vantage point, choosing once again to let events play out without interference. The lives he lived, the burdens he carries, and the choices he makes now ripple through his world in ways that even you, with your omnipotence, find fascinating. Time stretches forward, and you watch his life unfold once more. Year 1, the Uniter. The battlefield marks a turning.
Oh, she's struggling a little bit. Yeah, you know what? I'll just take over. It's fine. Year 1, the Uniter. The battlefield marks a turning point, not just for Ulrich, but for the world. His refusal to wield the dagger's power sets an example that resonates far beyond the armies he's disbanded. As soldiers lay down their arms, their leaders, awed by Ulrich's presence and insight, agree to meet at the negotiation table. Ulrich becomes a mediator, guiding these talks with wisdom born from the lives he has lived. He shares stories that strike at the heart of the conflict, reframing old grudges as shared struggles. His presence alone is enough to keep the peace tenuous, but intact. Year 5, the People's Champion. Unlike his first life, Ulrich chooses not to rule. He declines titles, crowns, and monuments, instead traveling the land as an advisor and advocate. His reputation grows, not as a savior, but as a man who understands and cares for the people. Villages that once feared soldiers now host peaceful gatherings. Trade routes flourish, and towns once scarred by war began to rebuild. Ulrich intervenes when necessary, not with the dagger's power, but with the quiet authority of someone who has seen the cost of failure firsthand. The dagger remains at his side, a constant reminder of the temptation he continues to resist. Year 10. The Fragile Peace. By the decade mark, Ulrich's influence has united most of the fractured kingdoms under a fragile peace. However, not everyone agrees with his vision. Whispers of dissent grow louder, particularly among those who seek power for themselves. Ulrich addresses these challenges with the same patience and the insight that have defined his journey, but he begins to feel the strain. He confides in a few trusted allies, mortals who see him not as a legend, but as a man struggling to carry an immense burden. Year 20. The Burden of Morality. Time begins to take its toll on Ulrich. Despite his enhanced mind, his mortal body ages, and the weight of the memories he carries grows heavier. The dagger, still untouched, feels like an anchor at his side. He often stares at it during moments of solitude, wondering if his refusal to use it has cost more lives than it saved. Yet, the peace he helped create holds strong. Though not perfect, it endures, because he taught the people how to solve their own conflicts. Ulrich's role diminishes as younger leaders step forward, inspired by his example. Year 30. The Quiet End. By the end of his life, Ulrich is no longer a public figure. He lives in a modest home in the countryside, surrounded by a small circle of friends and advisors. His once golden armor is long gone, replaced by simple robes. The dagger lies untouched in a chest, forgotten by all but him. As he feels his time drawing near, Ulrich gathers his companions and shares one final truth. Peace is never permanent, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. If I leave you with anything, let it be this. Listen, understand, and remember that every life matters. He passes away quietly, in his sleep, surrounded by those who love him, at peace with the life that he lived. From your vantage point, you watch Ulrich's second journey with satisfaction. Well, it's his third journey. This time his life was not marked by grand triumphs or bitter failures, but by quiet persistence and an unwavering commitment to understanding. The dagger, never wielded, remains a testament to his resolve. As his soul slips from the mortal plane, you sense it lingering for a moment, as if waiting for your own presence. The question now is whether you meet him again, or let his story conclude fully on its own. He awakens back at the poker table. Well, that seemed to go better, right? Back at the poker table. Once again, Ulrich awakens at the poker table. The battlefield around him still frozen in time, the chaos paused in an eternal instant. The cards shuffled themselves rhythmically, the dagger gleaming faintly in its place on the table. Across from him, as constant as the turning of the cosmos, you sit with that same amused expression. Ulrich's youthful body is restored, his armor pristine, but this time his eyes carry a deep weariness. Not from exhaustion, but from the accumulation of lifetimes. You lean back casually, flicking a card onto the table. Well, you say? The faintest hint of a smile tugging at your lips. That seemed to go better, right? Ulrich stares at you for a long moment, then lets out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. He leans back in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands before meeting your gaze. It did, he admits, his voice quiet but steady. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There were still mistakes, still pain, but he trails off, looking toward the frozen battlefield. But it felt better, right? Right? Better? At least. His gaze shifts to the dagger, his expression thoughtful. I didn't use it. Not once. I think that was the right choice. This time, it wasn't about me. It was about them. You have lived at least 2 or 3 of your own lifetimes and thousands more from the warrior's memories. Now, it's time to show you something you haven't thought about. I take him back to our first meeting, before I had changed him, when he still had the time crystal. This time Alric and I sit back watching from my unseen vantage point as the original Alric continues on the path he would have taken without my influence. You let Ulrich's words hang in the air for a moment before leaning forward slightly, your gaze steady. You've lived at least 2 or 3 of your own lifetimes, you say, and thousands more through the memories of others. Now it is time to show you something you haven't thought about. Before he can respond, the world around you shifts. The poker table, the frozen battlefield, and even the dagger dissolve into nothingness, replaced by the dim glow of your divine power. Ulrich is silent as reality bends, and when the light fades, the two of you stand in the past. You now stand unseen and untouched in the rooms where your original meeting took place. Before you, the original Ulrich moves cautiously through the desolate landscape, clutching the glowing temporal shard in his trembling hands. His robes are tattered, his frame frail, and his expression a mix of desperation and determination. The scene plays out as it did before. His discovery of the artifact, his muttered plans to use it to rewrite the timeline and save the world. Only this time, the Ulrich who stands beside you watches in stunned silence, his golden armor gleaming faintly in the dim light of the ruins. Without the intervention, your original Ulrich proceeds down a very different path. Using the temporal shard, he begins to manipulate time. At first, his efforts are small, rewinding mistakes, correcting missteps, but as his confidence grows, so too does his ambition. You and the current Ulrich observe his original self falls into the same traps you once guided him away from. Hubris, the misuse of power, and the inability to truly understand the people he sought to save. Each ripple he creates leads to unintended consequences, until finally the fragile threads of reality begin to unravel. The final moments of the original timeline are chaos incarnate. The temporal shard, pushed beyond its limits, fractures, sending waves of destabilizing energy throughout time itself. Entire regions vanish, their timelines erased. The world fractures into splintered shards, each trapped in an endless loop of destruction. And at the center of it all stands the original Ulrich, his body and mind consumed by the very power he sought to wield. From your vantage, the current Ulrich watches, his expression a mix of horror and sorrow. He takes a step forward as if to intervene, but stops, realizing the futility of the gesture. With a thought, you pull Ulrich back to the poker table. The battlefield remains frozen. The cards shuffle themselves once more, and the dagger gleams faintly between you. Ulrich sits in a stunned silence, his hands trembling as he processes what he just witnessed. That was me, he says finally, his voice barely above a whisper. If you hadn't stepped in, I would have destroyed everything. He looks up to you, his eyes searching for yours for some kind of answer. Why? Why'd you stop me? Why'd you help me? I was bored. You lean back in your chair, arms casually crossed, the faintest smirk playing on your lips. Ulrich's desperate. Searching gaze meets yours, and for a moment, the silence between you feels almost reverent. Then, with a shrug, you deliver the simple, unvarnished truth. I was bored. The words hang in the air like a thunderclap, shattering any sense of gravitas Ulrich might have attached to your actions. His jaw drops slightly, his expression a kaleidoscope of disbelief, frustration, and a hint of bitter amusement. You were bored? He repeats, incredulous. That's it? All of this? Everything I've been through? All the lives I've lived? It's just because you were bored? Nonchalantly. You nod nonchalantly. Yeah, pretty much. I had some time to kill, and you seemed interesting. Mortal with a toy that could twist time. How could I not get involved? He gestured bluntly, as if the explanation were self-evident. And look how much you've grown! I mean, you've gone from being a blundering little time thief to someone who actually understands people. I mean, It's been entertaining. Ulrich sumps back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He lets out a dry, humorless laugh. So I'm just some kind of cosmic entertainment for you? A passing distraction? Pretty much, you reply, not unkindly. But to be fair, you've exceeded expectations. Twice now. Ulrich shakes his head, his laughter growing softer, but gaining a tinge of genuine amusement. Ah, I don't know whether to thank you or to punch you, he says, rubbing his face. You chuckle, leaning forward slightly. The good news is, I'm still not bored. So what do you say? Want to go around again? I'll grant you one wish for your next go around. Within reason. I don't know if I need to read my version because it does kind of reiterate it, but suck it up. You lean forward, resting your elbows on the table, your fingers steepled in front of you. Ulrich's laughter fades as he looks at you, his expression caught between cautious curiosity and lingering disbelief. I'll grant you one wish, you say smoothly, your voice calm but laced with intrigue. For your next go-around. Within reason, of course. You pause, letting the weight of the offer settle. Think carefully. This is your chance to shape the game before it even begins. Ulrich blinks, leaning back in his chair as he processes your words. He glances at the dagger, then at the cards, his brow furrowed in thought. After everything he's been through, his triumphs, his failures, the weight of countless lives, he knows better than to take this lightly. One wish, he says, his voice quiet but steady. Oh, what does within reason mean? I mean, you're a god. What could possibly be unreasonable to you? You smirk. Oh, you know, the usual. No wishing for omnipotence, no undoing my boredom, and no wishing me out of existence. I mean, the wish has to fit the game, make it interesting. Ulrich nods slowly, his gaze distant as he turns the offer over in his mind. Finally, he looks up to you, his expression a mix of resolve and caution. I'll need a moment. If I'm getting one wish, I want to make it count. You lean back in your chair, your expression calm and unbothered. The cards shuffle themselves idly on the table as you wave a hand dismissively. Take your time, you say with an easy smile. It doesn't exist to me anyway. All your lifetimes combined have barely scratched a moment for me. You pause, tapping the table gently. So think carefully. You've got all the time in the world, or at least as much as you need. Ulrich exhales deeply, his tension easing slightly at your words. All the time in the world, huh? He mutters a faint smirk tugging at his lips. You'd think that'd make this easier. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the table as he stares at the cards, his thoughts turning inward, his memories, the lives he's lived, the choices he has made, and the lessons he learned. They all play through his mind in a quiet storm. You watch him in silence, the faint glow of the frozen battlefield casting soft shadows across his face. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, or a blink, depending on your perspective, Ulrich looks up at you, his blue eyes steady and clear. I want my wish to be this, he says in a voice firm. When I go back, I want to truly feel connected to the people I lead, not just to understand them like I did through their memories, but to live alongside them, to experience what they experience as it happens, not as an outsider looking in. He sits back, folding his arms across his chest. If I'm going to do this again, I want to be real. No shortcuts, no godlike detachment, just me, living and leading as one of them. As Ulrich finishes his request, you lean forward, resting your hands lightly on the table. A subtle smile tugs at your lips. a look of approval tempered with the faintest hint of mischief. Granted, you say simply, your voice resonating with a finality that leaves no room for doubt. Without so much as a flash or a ripple, the changes take hold. Ulrich feels a subtle shift within himself, as though the barriers between him and the world around him have dissolved. He suddenly understands what you meant by connection. It's not a burden or a flood, it's a clarity. He can sense the intentions, emotions, and even the essence of every living being near him, as effortlessly as breathing. He feels the dagger at his side, its quiet hum revealing its own subdued intent to remain unused. The poker table vanishes, and so do you. Ulrich finds himself in a bustling town square, surrounded by a crowd of people. The sun beats down on him as merchants call out their wares. Children run laughing through the streets, and stray animals dart between carts. But what strikes him most is the peace. Simply standing there, his presence radiates a calm that softens every face he sees. People seem drawn to him, though they don't know why. A merchant lowers his voice, speaking kindly to a struggling customer. A beggar finds herself offered not just a coin, but food and water. The world feels lighter, though only Ulrich knows the reason why, and so his new life begins. The lifetime of connection. As Ulrich walks this new path, his wish manifests in ways both profound and subtle. Every person he meets, every animal that crosses his path, reveals their soul to him, not through their words, but through an unspoken resonance that transcends language. He knows their fears, their dreams, their joys, and their sorrows. In relationships, Ulrich's presence heals divisions. People feel safe confiding in him, their vulnerability met with genuine understanding. His advice carries weight, not because of the authority, but because it feels deeply personal. In leadership, he becomes a figure of quiet strength, a leader who guides by example. Those who once doubted him find themselves inexplicably trusting him. Even his enemies falter, unsure why they feel no hatred in his presence. In solitude, Ulrich feels the full spectrum of the world around him. The love of a mother bird feeding her chicks, the quiet hunger of a stray dog, the sorrow of a lonely old man. It is overwhelming at times, but it also fills him with purpose. In challenges, the calming effect of his presence doesn't solve every problem. There are still conflicts, betrayals, and moments of despair, but Ulrich approaches them not as a ruler or a savior, but as someone who truly knows the hearts of those involved. His leadership is no longer an act. It is a natural extension of who he has become. Decades pass. Ulrich's life is long and full, marked not by grand victories, but by countless small moments of peace and understanding. The world he leaves behind is not perfect, but it is better than he found it. His name is spoken with reverence, not as a hero or god, but as a man who truly cared. In the final moments of his life, Ulrich rests beneath a tree, the sound of a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves. The world around him feels at peace, and he smiles softly, his thoughts calm. Think. So technically, I think I rewrite this piece. So, um, all right. So decades unfold. Da da da. The relationships. Blah blah blah. Final moments. All right. Here we go. In the twilight of his life, Ulrich retreats to a small, quiet village. He spends his days tending a modest garden surrounded by animals and visited by those who seek his advice. His hair turns silver. His step slows, but his spirit remains steady. The dagger, still untouched, rests forgotten in a simple wooden chest. One evening, as the sun sets over rolling hills, Alaric sits beneath a great oak tree. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves, carrying with it sounds of laughter from the village below. He closes his eyes, his heart not full of regret, but of peace. As the stars begin to appear in the sky, his breathing slows. With one final smile, Alaric passes quietly, the world around him calm and still. You watch from your unseen vantage, observing every detail of his final moments. The people in the village feel an inexorable warmth as the news of his passing spreads, their mourning tempered by the enduring comfort of his memory. Though you are omnipotent, you find yourself pausing, reflecting on this mortal's journey. Ulrich's life was not marked by grand victories or dramatic endings, but by the quiet, persistent betterment of those he encountered. A mortal life, imperfect and fleeting, yet rich with meaning. You wait patiently for the right moment to meet him again. Time is yours to command, and for now you choose to let the world settle into the peace he leaves behind. Ulrich awakens familiar poker table. Seated amidst the frozen chaos of the battlefield, the clash of swords, the scream of soldiers, the roar of war machines, all frozen in time. A moment, suspended in eternity. He blinks, his youthful body restored, his armor gleaming as though freshly forged. The poker table is as it always was, with the dagger resting in its place and the cards shuffling themselves idly. But this time you are not there. For the first time since this strange journey began, Alaric is truly alone. He sits in silence, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield. At first his expression is calm, but as the absence of your presence registers, unease creeps into his features. He leans back into his chair, crossing his arms as if to wait. When nothing happens, he stands, his chair scraping faintly against the ground. Hello? He calls out, his voice echoing faintly. The frozen figures around him remain motionless, their faces twisted in expressions of fear, rage, and determination. Are you out there? Still nothing. Curiosity overtakes him and he steps away from the table, moving cautiously through the battlefield. He passes soldiers frozen mid-swing, an archer poised to release an arrow, a war machine belching fire into the stillness. His connection to every soul around him lingers faintly, like whispers on the edge of hearing. It is comforting, but also a reminder of the immense burden he has carried. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the battlefield, you move unseen, your divine senses honing in on the threads of intent that weave through each frozen soldier. Most are tinged with fear, desperation, or anger, their violence born of circumstance rather than true malice. But there are darker threads here, minds steeped in cruelty, hearts blackened by hatred, greed, and a lust for power. You sift through these until you find the one that stands out, like a pitch-black flame against the muted colors of mortal intent. There's a hidden figure among the chaos, a man clad in dark, jagged armor, his gauntleted hand clutching a blood-streaked sword. His face is twisted into a cruel sneer. His thoughts a torrent of self-serving ambition and sadistic pleasure. Unlike many others on this battlefield, this one fights not out of duty or desperation, but because he relishes the pain he inflicts. His soul burns with malevolence, a beacon of darkness amidst the chaos. In the stillness of frozen time, the malevolent soldier awakens to find himself seated at your poker table, his jagged armor gleaming faintly in the frozen light on the battlefield. The blood-streaked sword, his constant companion, rests at his side. Confusion flashes across his face as he scans his surroundings, his cruel sneer faltering for a moment. Across from him you sit, reading a calm authority that defies the chaos around you. The cards shuffle themselves, idly, the rhythmic sound punctuating the silence. He tenses, his hand instinctively moving toward his sword, but your presence stops him cold. Your words cut through the stillness like a knife.
What are you up to out here, soldier?
The man blinks, his gauntleted fingers twitching as he fights to regain his composure. His sneer returns, but it's weaker this time, masking unease. freezes. What the hell is this? He growls, his voice rough and filled with suspicion. Who are you? Some kind of mage? He glances around the battlefield, taking in the frozen chaos, his expression flickering with confusion and frustration. Finally, his gaze lands back on you. His lips curl into a mocking smirk, though his eyes betray a flicker of fear. It doesn't matter who you are, he says, his tone dripping with arrogance. If you're here to kill me, get on with it. Or are you one of those fools who think they can lecture me into seeing the light? The soldier... Oh, see? Now, sometimes it does say what. I have no intention of having you see the light. Actually, I searched out your malevolence on purpose, silly. I need you to be a challenger in this next lifetime. The soldier freezes at your words, his sneer faltering as the full weight of what you've said begins to settle over him. His hand, still poised near his bloody sword, twitches slightly. For the first time, true uncertainty flickers in his dark eyes. You searched me out? He repeats, the bravado in his voice crackling slightly. What for? A challenger? What the hell does that even mean? He leans forward slightly, his gaze narrowing as he tries to read your expression. But there is no malice in your tone, no judgment. It's a calm certainty that unnerves him more than any threat could. What kind of twisted game is this? He asks, his voice low and suspicious. I fought kings, warlords, beasts, all of them. They thought they could beat me. They're all dead now. You think you're any different? He gestures to the battlefield around you with a sneer, though his bravado is clearly starting to crack. Or is this your idea of a joke? Freezing time, sitting me at this damn table, talking about lifetimes and challengers? If you want me dead, just do it. I don't play games. The soldier's arrogance burns brightly, but it is laced with the faintest trace of fear. He is trying to make sense of what is happening, but your calm demeanor and the surreal nature of the frozen battlefield have left him shaken. The soldier freezes mid-sentence as you wave your hand, cutting him off with your amused dismissal. Aren't you cute? Anyway, you say, your tone light but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Before he can react, the change begins. His jagged armor grows darker, the metal twisting and writhing like it's alive. Spikes and ridges jut out at unnatural angles, giving him a monstrous silhouette. The sword at his side hums with a new malevolent energy, its blade now blackened and dripping an unnatural red aura that seems to pulse with hatred. The air around him grows heavy, oppressive, as his very presence begins to radiate menace. He becomes the antithesis of Ulrich's coming aura. Where Ulrich brings peace and comfort, this soldier now embodies violence incarnate. Hatred and bloodlust ooze from him, tangible enough to make even the frozen battlefield seem darker and colder. The soldier clutches the edge of the table, his eyes wide as the transformation settles over him. His breathing quickens, his gauntleted hands trembling slightly as he stares at his newly empowered form. He seems torn between a twisted and perverse delight and horror. What did you do? Whoa, what did you do to me? He growls, his voice deeper now, reverberating with an unnatural growl that carries the weight of his newfound malice. His lips curl into a sharp-toothed grin, his sneer more menacing than ever before. This power, he mutters, flexing his fingers as he examines the red haze now surrounding his hands. This is magnificent. What is it? What am I? The soldier's aura now drips with malevolence, his very existence a beacon of hatred and violence. The battlefield around you feels darker, the frozen figures seemingly recoiling from his presence, though they remain still.
You're an antithesis. Don't be fooled. This isn't your story, but you will play your part.
The soldier's malevolent grin fades slightly as your words cut through the air with finality.
You're an antithesis.
You say, your voice calm and unwavering.
Don't be fooled. This isn't your story, but you will play a part.
He opens his mouth to respond, but you've clearly already moved on. With a subtle wave of your hand, you imbue him with an immunity to Ulrich's coming aura and the power of his dagger. No force in Ulrich's possession will be able to compel nor sway him. The soldier, now the embodiment of violence and hatred, is ready to step onto the stage. Before he can speak again, you vanish without a trace, leaving him alone at the poker table amidst the frozen chaos of the battlefield. The war explodes back as time resumes its relentless march. Soldiers charge, blades clash, and arrows scream through the air once more. The oppressive aura of the soldier, now a figure of living malevolence, spreads like a dark fog, rippling through the battlefield. Those near him falter, their rage and fear amplified by his presence. Ulrich, now in his fourth lifetime, feels the shift immediately. He stands amidst the chaos, his coming aura still radiating peace to those around him, but the presence of something deeply wrong cuts through it like a knife. He scans the battlefield, his senses attuned to every soul in the fray, but the antithesis immunity keeps him hidden from Ulrich's understanding. For now. As the war unfolds, Ulrich's connection to the people continues to guide his action. He moves through the battlefield like a coming tide, turning soldiers from violence and helping them find peace. His choices are measured, his wisdom hard-won from his past lives. Yet this time there's a darker force at play, one that no calming words or peaceful gesture can touch. The soldier, now the antithesis, begins to carve his own path through the battlefield, his mere presence igniting bloodlust and chaos. The stage is set and the interplay of peace and violence begins anew, each force shaping the other in ways even you cannot fully predict. From your unseen vantage, you observe the ripples of your actions. The antithesis moves like a storm through the battlefield, his presence shifting the tides of the conflict. Ulrich, unaware of your involvement, remains steadfast in his path, his calming presence a beacon of hope amid the chaos. For now you simply watch, the unfolding drama a testament to the complexity of moral struggle. You remain hidden in the fabric of time, weaving the threads of fate with a quiet but deliberate hand. As the battle rages on, you subtly influence the movements of the soldiers, pulling their attention away from the chaos for just a moment. You part the masses of combatants, giving both Ulrich and the antithesis a clear line of sight to each other across the battlefield. The moment of clarity arrives when they lock eyes. Ulrich's senses immediately pick up on the disturbance in the air, the subtle shift in the aura around him. His calm, peaceful influence has always been a beacon, but now there was something darker, more menacing in his immediate vicinity. He sees the soldier standing amidst the fray, his presence so unnatural, so violently charged that it feels like a physical force. The soldier, now a living embodiment of hatred, meets Ulrich's gaze, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as he senses the very opposite of what he is. Calm, peace, and understanding, radiating from Ulrich like a soft, soothing breeze. For the antithesis, this moment is just as profound. His twisted, malevolent energy senses something foreign and strange. A presence that threatens to strip away the chaos he so carefully cultivates. A sense of peace and calm flows from Ulrich, radiating in waves that disrupt the air around him. The antithesis sneers, his hand twitching toward his blade as he feels the dark essence recoil from Ulrich's aura. He can sense the balance shifting, and it enrages him. This figure, this force of tranquility, stands as his opposite. It is as if fate itself has set them on a collision course. The battlefield pauses for a moment,
the sound of combat blurring into the background as the two figures stare across the carnage. The calm and the chaos, locked in a brief but intense confrontation. Ulrich stands firm, his mind reaching out to the soldiers around him, trying to calm them, to draw them away from the bloodshed. His aura, a beacon of peace, glows brightly in the midst of the storm. The antithesis, in contrast, feeds off the violence. His presence is a void, an oppressive weight that draws the soldiers' attention, amplifying their darkest impulses. Hatred swells around him, a tangible force that threatens to crush everything in its path. For a moment, neither moves. The soldiers around them seem to hesitate, some drawn to the antithesis, feel an urge to fight, to give in to their baser instincts. Others, influenced by Ulrich, feel a sense of calm and hesitation, as if they're suddenly aware of the futility of their violence. This is your subtle intervention. Two powerful forces pulled toward one another, their energies at odds. The battle has shifted. Ulrich, unknowing, now faces his greatest challenge. As the tension hangs heavy in the air, you act unseen. Your voice a phantom that only the antithesis can hear. It is subtle, yet it carries the weight of inevitability, stirring the depths of his malevolence.
Go get him,
you whisper, your tone playful, yet commanding. The antithesis stiffens, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as your words ignite a spark within him. A twisted grin spreads across his face, his jagged teeth bared as if savoring the violence to come. His aura grows darker, more oppressive, as if feeding on your unseen encouragement. The soldiers nearest to him flinch instinctively, their instincts recoiling from the sheer malice radiating from his presence. With deliberate, menacing steps, the antithesis begins to move forward, his blood-streaked sword dragging across the ground, leaving a trail of glowing embers in its wake. His voice rumbles low, almost a growl, as he mutters, "Let's see what you're really made of, golden boy." Across the battlefield, Ulrich senses a shift immediately. The oppressive force bearing down on him is no longer stationary. It's moving. His connection to the soldiers around him feels strained, their calm disrupted by the growing storm of hatred approaching from the other side. He steps forward cautiously, his hand brushing the hilt of his dagger, though he was never drawn it in his lifetime. The temptation lingers at the edge of his thoughts. He can feel the weight of what's coming. The clash between two forces far greater than any single mortal could fully comprehend. Yet, as always, he remains resolute. His aura of calm grows stronger, a soothing wave that ripples outward, countering the chaos creeping towards them. The soldiers on the battlefield begin to clear a path, as if compelled by forces beyond their control. The antithesis strides forward, his aura of hatred burning like a wildfire. While Ulrich moves to meet him, his calm presence a steady tide pushing back against the storm. The air grows heavy as the two forces draw closer, their opposing auras colliding invisibly, creating a charged stillness that envelops the battlefield. Invisible and unnoticed, you weave your influence into the minds of both Ulrich and the antithesis. The suggestions are faint, whispers barely indistinguishable from their own thoughts, yet they carry just enough weight to nudge them toward the inevitable clash. For the antithesis, the suggestion comes up as a surge of primal instinct, a sudden and undeniable desire to dominate and destroy the opposing force of calm that dares to stand in his way. His grip tightens on the sword, the jagged blade crackling faintly with the dark energy of his malevolence.
jump up, strike him down. Know what true power looks like.
The thought feels like his own, born from the depths of his seething hatred. His grin widens as he crouches slightly, preparing to leap forward like a predator pouncing on its prey. For Ulrich, the suggestion comes as a quiet nudge, a whisper of caution amidst a storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. His connection to the people around him remains strong, but now his focus narrows on the figure approaching him.
Raise your shield. Prepare for the clash. This isn't like the others.
The thought feels natural, an extension of the instincts he's honed over lifetimes. His hand moves without hesitation, lifting his shield, a symbol of protection, not aggression, as he plants his feet firmly on the ground. The antithesis springs forward, his dark aura erupting in a wave of violence as he launches himself into the air, his jagged blade aimed directly at Ulrich. His leap carries an unnatural force, propelled by the sheer malice coursing through his body. Ulrich, seeing the attack, raises his shield just in time. The blade crashes against it with an ear-splitting clang, a shower of sparks exploding outward as the impact reverberates across the battlefield. The force of the collision sends a ripple through the ground, momentarily silencing the chaos all around them. Locked in the clash, their oars swirl and push against each other like opposing tides. The calming influence of Ulrich meets the oppressive storm of the antithesis, the balance between them creating a charged stillness that grips the battlefield. The soldiers nearby, caught in the invisible pull of their conflicting forces, watch in awe and confusion, unable to look away, some feeling an overwhelming urge to drop their weapons and retreat, while others clutch their blades tighter. Their rage amplified by the antithesis' presence, this battle has begun, not just between two men, but between the forces of calm and chaos, peace and violence. As the jagged sword meets the polished shield, the battlefield falls silent. Time itself halts at the moment of impact, the sword's edge grinding against the shield, sparks frozen midair, and the ripples of force suspended in their first trembling vibration. Ulrich and the antithesis remain locked in place, unable to move their bodies, yet fully conscious of the moment. Their minds remain active, their thoughts racing as they process the surreal stillness around them. Ulrich's calm mind stirs as he senses the unnatural pause. He has lived lifetimes under your guidance, or your manipulation, as he might sometimes think, and he recognizes this as your hand at work.
What is this?
He wonders, his thoughts calm yet questioning.
You're here again, aren't you? Is this another test, or something worse?
He focuses on the antithesis, his mind reaching out instinctively, trying to sense more of the being locked before him. Yet, unlike the countless lives he's connected with before, the antithesis feels alien. He senses nothing but a void of malice and hatred, a soul untouchable by his connection. The antithesis, in contrast, thrashes mentally against the stillness. His thoughts a roaring storm of rage and frustration.
What is this trickery? Who dares interrupt me?
His eyes, though unmoving, burn with a desire to strike again.
Golden Boy's tricks, or something else?
For the first time, a flicker of unease creeps into his thoughts. He recalls your whisper in his ear, the sensation of being watched, manipulated.
You. It's you, isn't it? Show yourself, coward!
Though unseen, you allow your voice to echo softly in their minds, omnipresent and calm, carrying the weight of the infinite.
Take a moment,
you say, your tone almost playful,
to consider where you stand. I mean, this is a crossroads, after all. The clash of calm and chaos, of peace and violence. Isn't it beautiful? You both played your roles so well.
You let the stillness linger for a moment longer, giving each of them time to stew in their own thoughts.
I decide not to say that. I mess with it a little bit.
You appear from nowhere, stepping effortlessly into the frozen scene of clashing forces. The battlefield, still locked in time, seems insignificant beneath your presence. Ulrich and the antithesis, locked in the heat of their first clash, are helpless to move. But their minds remain painfully aware of your arrival.
With a simple gesture, the ground beneath them trembles and begins to rise. The frozen battlefield lifts into the air, encapsulated by a shimmering crystalline dome. Sparks, soldiers, and all the chaos within are perfectly preserved, suspended in the eternal moment of conflict. Standing before them in their stillness, you speak with an authority that shakes the very fabric of their being.
You think I manipulated your lives as if they mattered in some cosmic game?
You say, your voice calm but laced with quiet finality.
You're wrong. You're nothing more than an ornament for my shelves now.
Their minds reel at your words, unable to resist or even speak. The weight of your declaration settles into them. A realization of utter insignificance in the face of your limitless power. You step away carrying the shimmering snow globe, like dome containing their frozen clash. It glows faintly in your hands as you place it carefully on a shelf alongside countless others. Each globe holds a moment in time, some grand, others trivial, but all equally significant in your endless collection. The shelf stretches infinitely in either direction, a testament to your eternal boredom and your penchant for preserving moments you find amusing, beautiful, or simply worth keeping. As you place the dome among the others, it sparkles faintly, the frozen clash between peace and violence, forever captured in its perfect, eternal stillness. You step back, admiring your work. The delicate balance between Ulrich's calm and the antithesis of chaos make this particular ornament stand out. A fine addition to your ever-growing collection. Their struggles, their journeys, their hopes and fears are now preserved as a testament to your wit. Satisfied, you turn away, leaving the shelves behind, for now. There are always new moments to create, new lives to mold, and new ornaments to add to your infinite gallery. For you, time is nothing. The possibilities are endless, and your boredom momentarily satisfied.
Well, that's the end of chapter 1 here. There's actually quite a bit more here, but I've been recording for almost 2 hours now, which I did not expect. Please leave a comment below how you feel about this, how you feel about the voices, whether you like me as a narrator or prefer ChatGPT. If this garners enough attention, I might do this a little bit more professionally instead of just winging it, unedited. I can actually, edit something together in the future. Yeah, so please let me know if you like this, if you like this story. It's a mix of not just, what ChatGPT can create, but what my mind allows to exist, and it was a lot of fun writing, and I just kind of did it because I was bored, So here we are.